So let us explore those themes of developing the workforce and future jobs. I've got a really great panel. I've got Eman Martin-Vignerte from Bosch. I've got Peter Bosch from Bentley. I've got, if only Alena's surname was Bentley. No, Alena Useinovic from Scheffler UK and David Roberts from Evtec. And I'm going to invite them up here whilst we watch a short video with some of their introductory thoughts.
With technology, with software, with customer changes, with environmental level impacts, all these lead ultimately to people.
Of course the UK can compete, as long as we're showing ourselves as viable employers. There is a huge talent pool out there, and we are dedicated in supporting the academic side of engineering as well as the employment side.
We at Bentley attract talent by giving them a clear purpose. The purpose to pioneer the future of luxury mobility.
The challenge is to spread this excellence further, equipping more talented young people with the skills that will cement the UK automotive sector's global influence into the electrified, connected and autonomous era and beyond.
Well, thank you for that. Welcome, all of you. Great to have you up here on the stage. And we've already, as I said, we've dug into some of these subjects already. So let's really get deep into the detail of it all. We know there are challenges for skills. We know there are skills shortages. But do you want to, perhaps, Peter, if I can start with you first of all, describe what you feel at Bentley your real challenges are at the moment?
Developing and changing skills, that has always been important for our industry. And we've been always resilient to change, because we changed all the time in the skills we developed and our teams had. I think the big difference now is that we've somehow announced a big revolution, and it's happening. Yeah? That's overall in the industry. It's also with Bentley. We've said, we're going to be end-to-end carbon neutral until the end of the century. We've announced to go all electric. We'll go autonomous. So there's so many changes now coming up, not only because we want them, but also we heard that of legislation, new competitors, new customer behaviors, and I think that accelerates the whole path. If I look at people at Bentley, very often different generations are working there, father and son, sometimes grandfather has worked there. And some of them, if they're in the trim shop, they're passing on these skills, and they're gradually changing. Now it's sustainable leather, and you can have light-through leather and so on. But in some other families, the father was the grandfather was in the body shop. The father is a robot minder, but the son is doing a digital apprenticeship. So that's the first topic we experience at Bentley. It accelerates. And we've identified only in manufacturing 125 future skills we need to bring into the team. The second topic is digitalization. When I had a colleague briefing with all the colleagues, I went on stage and said, so before we start, guys, disclaimer. This will be a software company soon. So imagine the Bentley team. What? And it will be a software company, and we need to be aware of that. So yes, we have all these skill changes, but digital, that's what it is. And the third element, in my eyes, and it hasn't been mentioned too much today already, since so many topics will be done by computers, by machines, by artificial intelligence, the most important skill are people skills, is empathy, because that you can't replace by machines. And building and selling and developing cars still is a people business.
So, Eman, let's get at the perspective from a supplier, from Bosch. Do you see that you're kind of meeting the challenges of the skill shortages at the moment, or could you identify some gaps?
Well, it will cross over what Peter is saying, but I really would like also to express, and it was mentioned in the panels before, we as an industry has the transition, which was mentioned last year with COP26, the net zero carbon agenda, and then, we had to go from the combustion engine transition to electrification. Electric engine is totally different as a combustion engine. The combustion is more mechanical engineering required, and the electronics is more actually different skills required. So we need to think about upskilling the current workforce. We cannot leave anyone behind. So upskilling the current workforce and then getting them into the electrified environment. Then we're talking about automated driving, which will bring more digitalizations and software skills, which we don't have yet. And add to that as well, if you think about the transitions from the workforce we need, so the combustion engine, we needed like 10 workers now to develop and also to manufacture the engine. When we go to the electrified engines, we need only one person. And for automated, it's even more drastically. So we need to think about the skills for 2030 and 2050. And that means is not only that we have the challenge of the transitions to the different technologies, but also how can we upskill our own people, what would be the skills required in the education schemes, and what would be done in the policy to have a proper, pipeline with the diversity, with the diverse, teams, what we need in the future. So that is definitely the skill sets what we don't have. And additional to that, with the Brexit, and I would like to mention, not to point out, but we have an immigration problem at the moment. So the British engineers now, they're not allowed, for example, to conduct works in Europe, or actually even, have sort of training meetings with their counterparts if it's titled as work. So that is also a challenge itself to actually then localize some of the trainings required here in the UK. So indirectly, there is some, of course, legacy of the post-Brexit. And the COVID requirements, as also Chris pointed out in his presentation, the behavior of people towards work changed. And they're more comfortable to have a hybrid requirement, which is actually not bad. That could be an opportunity to then tap into different talent pools within, like women who are actually able then to come into work because they don't have to be there 24/7. So I think there are challenges, but there are opportunities at the same time.
I want to pick up on about 17 of the comments you just made.
I was going to say, we can go now, can't we?
But I would like to hear from Alena as well. Tell me, from Scheffler's point of view, how are you addressing presumably a similar suite of problems?
Yep. So we've all got, I think you've summarised it perfectly, a similar issue. I think for us, and it's maybe something that hasn't been said, yes, we're all on this road to electrification, automation, and I don't want to say that the internal combustion engine is going to be around forever, but it will be in this space for another 10 or so years. There's an aftermarket that needs servicing. Engines will still be in some cars, not the same. So it's the transition and balance of moving speedily to electrification, as you've said, digitalization, all the topics, automation, etc., but still maintaining a solid base of the current workforce and current knowledge that we have, and taking them on that journey and finding the perfect jump-off point when you say, now you're moving, and then being available with training, hybrid trainings, online trainings, face-to-face stuff, because some of these skills you can't just, say, sit in front of your PC and learn about automation in an hour's online session. It doesn't quite sit that well. It goes back to empathy, it goes back to humans, bringing them along, because a lot of employees, I think, they hear messages from the top and they go, what are you on about? I'm still building engines, and I'm quite happy building engines. Yeah. They don't see the need that in 5-10 years' time, there will be a much less requirement. So it's taking them along with you whilst the industry is on this fast-paced journey that has accelerated with COVID and isn't stopping. I'll leave the rest to you.
My bit's easy.
Yes,
So, our biggest challenge is people, and I think people are going to be the limiting factor for many companies. So, from our organisation, we put people at the very top of every decision we make. So it's a strategic function. We don't call it HR, we call it people ops. That kind of came out of Google, but we also operate in California, which is one of the most competitive places for attracting software, power electronics, embedded engineers. So our culture's been about reinventing itself over the last couple of years. And now if we lose a person in any of our locations, the leadership team treat it almost like a recall moment on a product or a quality issue. We take it that seriously. And I believe that organisations, large and small, OEM, tier ones, tier twos, if they've not already done so, and I suspect most have, but I think you've got to put people right at the top of the priority list as a leadership team, If you don't do that, I genuinely believe you'll fail. Other people will take
How
over.
are you doing that? Is it about cash? Is it about culture? What's it? How are you doing it?
We recruit in America, we recruit in Prague, we recruit in the UK, we recruit in China. It's not just about comp. It's about what people are joining. And I think the energy transition, the automotive transition we're seeing, old boys like me need to wake up. And it's a new world. And the people we now attract, we would not have attracted 20 years ago. And they demand and require, and probably rightly so, a completely different way of working. So we work out at what we call our belonging concept. So we want everybody who joins us to belong. We don't want people being with us 3 years in California, getting all the stock options and moving on to Google or Apple, which is the game everybody plays. So we look to really buy into people in the early days, before they join us, to make sure they share our vision, they share our community aspects, they share our defeating climate change. And what we found by doing a lot of work pre-hire with people, and this takes over 90 days typically, we don't have anybody leave. When they join, they know exactly what they're joining. And they know our values, and they know the way we come, and they know the way we have fun. And we found that worked really, really well. Now, we're a smaller organisation than some, so in a sense, we can influence that a little bit easier, I suspect. But I think, for me, the number one priority would be make people your number one consideration as leadership teams, because the whole industry is changing.
I mean, Peter, I know that you've dedicated your mission at Bentley to making it the most attractive company to work for, and I am intrigued as to what that looks like. How are you doing that? How are you attracting that talent?
I think building on what you've said, a lot of people think it's about compensation, and a bit it is, but overall it isn't. What we experience, and that's with undergrads, with grads, but also with experts, it's about purpose. People want to go to work to achieve something. And I can only say my purpose is to help bring that industry, that UK automotive industry, and Bentley as an important part of it, into the future, into that digital, sustainable, electrified future. And the purpose we give to our people, the people we hire, but especially the people we develop and reskill, we say, that's part of your mission. What do you need for that? You can come to us and you can pioneer that movement to build the most sustainable, most desirable luxury car of the future. And that purpose element is really, really important. The second element is certainly development, also what you said. People don't want to stick in one place or in one role. They want to develop, they want to explore, they want to experience. And that's what we are with a purposeful journey are doing within Bentley, but of course with the Volkswagen Group in the background, you can pursue international careers also in different areas. That's quite important. And then one element I wouldn't underestimate, and that more or less recently became more important, is the way how you work. Yeah? So is hybrid working an exception or is it normal? Of course it's normal. Yeah? How does your workplace look like? In a factory, of course, but also in the office. At Bentley, during the pandemic, we've closed down all our offices and we've all renovated them. And after people came back, they didn't have a workplace anymore. They had to book it through an app. Yeah. And there are 12 different workplace concepts. And yes, there is a normal desk, but it's the exception. There are all kinds of collaboration zones, stages, a library where you can't say a word because it's quiet, and so on. You book that through the app hour by hour, and that's why you come in. And the whole campus is green, it's sustainable, it's great, and also, yeah, the coffee tastes well. And this is the way how you make people love to come to work and attract them and retain them. Yeah? And it feels good to be in such a company.
I mean, Eman, I'd love to pick your brains about the image problem that the automotive industry has had in terms of the way the workforce looks. We had a disingenuous comment from Peter saying, actually, old boys need to wake up. And it has been a bit of a boys' club till now. Mm-hmm. How are companies like yours attracting a more diverse workforce?
So So I first want to point out we have a pretty much German board here with Bentley and Scheffler and Bosch. So I studied in Germany. I'm Qatari, but I studied in Germany. And the engineering in Germany has its own definitions. And you are an engineer, so you have your salary path and career path. Everything is defined. And then when I came to the UK, and I remember that my neighbor, when I told him I'm an engineer, and he said, oh, it's fantastic. We really have a problem with our toilet. And if you can fix it, that'd be really great. He thought I'm a plumber. And I didn't really get it. And then afterwards, my colleagues, they said, no, engineer could have different definitions in the UK. So it's not protected, actually, if you like, in education path. So I think in the UK, yeah, there's a special case that there's maybe different definitions of engineer, which actually then maybe could damage the image. This is the first point. Secondly, is also when you look to engineers, you connect that to the blue-collar workers, which is not bad. But for some people, maybe they would put them off, especially girls. And I think this is something we can work on it. In my opinion, at the moment, that the whole industry has an image problem, generally speaking, as a boys club. And if you're talking about the D&I agenda, I mean, I'm chairing it with Helen Ford. She's also in the audience. And we're trying really to create, through the Auto Council, a report to thematize the D&I agenda in general. And it's really difficult to get the data. And that will reflect on also the mix of the industry at the moment. And the suppliers, I'm sure, Alena, you will probably agree, we even have different problem than Bentley, because Bentley, it's beautiful cars, a good image, and probably you will attract more people than a supplier building engines. So that is even more, a negative point. But I think, generally speaking, you're asking about, the retention and the image, and both combination is currently a problem also because of the inflation and all what we are facing at the moment. That actually you have less skills in the market, that will drive higher salaries and actually difficult to retain the people, which goes back to what you said, Peter. Purpose really should be on the heart of everything what we do as a company, because the salary shouldn't be your purpose to stay in the company. So I totally agree.
Alena, what do you think your company's doing to try and unlock greater diversity in the workforce? Or what should they be doing?
I think as an industry, and we are a nice mix, but as an industry, we are still pretty much elderly gentlemen.
Thank you.
That's
Excuse me?
You're less grey than me, so yeah, you win. We've kind of all got a similar problem attracting young people into the industry and then young females, because they look at the industry and they see a room full of men and they find it, why do I fit? I don't fit into that space. So I think we need to open up, talk to STEM, talk to young kids, and it is truly at the very beginning of childhood. And I think we've all got the issue that, I've got a son, I'll buy him blue clothes. You just have that inbuilt to a certain degree, so you have to change your modus operandi. We've actually in the UK recently employed our first female plant manager. I think at Scheffler she is the second female plant manager. Shows you there is a route, but it is still a very small percentage of females that are represented. It's nice to see that in this room actually there is a larger number of females, so I think that it is starting to happen, but it's slow, or it's slower than it should be. Fundamentally you need to set the change from the top. There needs to be a policy. Germany has set out a quota. Do I personally agree with quotas? Not necessarily, but if it isn't naturally coming by itself in the speed that you want it to, you kind of have to push it down from the top, sadly. And I think there is something that we can do as employers, government, policy setters to drive that change, because it isn't organically happening by itself at the speed that it should.
I just want to ask you, David, I know that Evtec's got a really interesting employment profile in that you are, I think, the proportionally the biggest employer of a disabled workforce.
We are. Yeah.
And so I'd be just interested briefly just to hear how that came about.
Sure. So back in 2012, David Cameron decided to privatise what was called the Remploy business, which a lot of people in this audience will know. And we acquired the automotive side of that. And we inherited a workforce with about 35-40% disability in it. I'd never worked before in an organisation with that higher level of disability. And for me, it was a kind of Rubicon moment, because I started to realise there's a great untapped reservoir of talent in the disability space. And we've now expanded that into what we call the disadvantaged space. So we kind of built the business around, I guess, two things. We built it around people with skill, but we also built it around people with will. And as we went into that will sector, that was people over 50. That was very young people, particularly disadvantaged people. And that really helped us develop a profile of a whole range of people, from a diversity angle, from an inclusive angle, from an equity angle, and from a belonging angle. So if anybody comes around any of our facilities, they're kind of blown away by the whole culture of walking through the front door. And we've worked really, really hard to really build on that momentum we've got. And so I've discovered that you can have disability in the workplace, and it's actually commercially successful. Now, 20, 30 years ago, I would have almost dismissed that as, that's just not practical, it's just not going to happen. But if you have the right wherewithal, if you have the right engineering talent to design systems and processes, you can do some remarkable things. So again, I'd just say to everybody, don't discount that pool of talent in disability and in disadvantaged. And if we're going to do ESG, if we're going to do it properly and not just have it in the brochure, leadership teams have really got to embrace that, really think about it. So we've worked hard at Evtec on it. We're rolling it out into other companies now. And the results we've found are really strong. So I'd urge everybody, if anybody wants to come and see how we do it, we're an open house. It's a really interesting experience to see how do you build quality assembly parts for all the big OEMs with about a third of the workforce who've got one element of disability or not. It's truly inspirational.
I consider that an open invitation, ladies and gentlemen. That sounds great, actually, doesn't it? Really good. Now, let's just go back to where we started, which is we all acknowledge there's a skills, whether there's skills challenges now or coming down the track fast, we know they've got to be approached. So how are we going to approach them? We've already said it might not be, click, have you done your hours course online? We know that's not going to be enough. So where does it come from? Does it come from education right from key stage one? Does it come from government regulation? Who wants to kick this off? I mean, I don't know, Peter, maybe, where would you like to see some real re-education structure in the industry?
I think we can always ask for support from all kinds of institutions. In the end, it's us as the industry who needs to define what it is and also drive it. And to be very honest, at Bentley, we've defined that for ourselves. We've exactly defined what the skills are. I've put the education and skill center in the center of the factory, so everybody can see it. Logistically, it doesn't make sense at all, but perception-wise, it's super important. We also put our heritage center, a small heritage garage next to it, so we honor our past, but we see what's the future, and you can see at that skill center what's trained today and who's in there, and it's the cool people who are in there and so on. And I think we need to create that culture, and yes, of course, institutions like universities, like levies and so on are really important, but the driver's us, and we know best what's right for the industry. And I think with that very strong network of OEMs, of tier ones, of research institutions, of fans in the UK. We've been to Goodwood on the weekend, 250,000 people loving the automobile. Yeah? This should be possible, and we need to drive it. I'm not asking for someone to impose it on us. We need to drive it. We're the entrepreneurs, and skill development is very entrepreneurial.
I mean, Eman, you're nodding, but we heard a call from Constanza earlier in the report, which was published today, for an updated apprenticeship levy, a long-term skills strategy from the government. I mean, is that something that you would like to get behind? Would you like to see, as I say, an updated approach to getting young people?
Well, the elephant, the elephant in the room. Yeah, the elephant in the room is the apprenticeship levy. Let's be honest, it's not working. We said that as an industry several times. We want a flexible apprenticeship levy. I know that, SMMT and CBI and others, they're trying actually to communicate that through the government, and I think there is a negotiation also to do that. Currently is not working, and I'm saying that as a tier 1 supplier because we do train, for example, apprentices on behalf of the OEMs for example, electric engines, for automated driving, and we do need, for example, vehicles to train them and to make them fit for the future. These vehicles usually donated from the OEMs, and then we do the training. After the COVID, we're all suffering financially, so they cannot just donate the vehicles. So we ask if we can tap into our levy to finance the vehicles, but we cannot tap into our levy. So we have more than 800,000 on the levy pot, which we cannot access. And I think this is mad. So I think something needs to be done to reform the apprenticeship levy. And secondly is, from the education purposes, the EU now, they're starting the 2030 skills. I know Bentley is also a member there, really to define what are the education skill sets we need in the future, which we need to add to the academic education. And secondly is also to talk openly about the automation challenge, because we will need less workers in the future, but we cannot leave them behind. So what else can be done to upskill these people for the future? So this is something we need to think about it anyway, and also for the generation to come. I just wanted to mention a quick thing. I was in India 3 months this year and last year. And usually, I wouldn't be surprised, but I was very surprised on how many young people there were in the plant. I was very surprised that 50% of the middle management were women. I don't know how the heck they did this, but they managed. And as well as the third one is that they really had a very systematic educational system. So what I'm trying to say is maybe we need to look globally to find ways of improving what can be done here locally.
I mean, Alena, there's been a huge emphasis over the last, 10, 15 years at least on STEM subjects in schools. I mean, are you seeing that coming through at Scheffler?
Yes, we are working with a number of universities, so yeah, we are seeing a result, but I would say it's slower than the industry needs it. It's a trickle rather than a constant stream. And I think that goes back. We need to speak to universities more, attract more, and maybe as an industry we need to open up to younger children and say why we are so great. Maybe take them all to Goodwood. I don't know. But I think there is, and that's where government and policy does come in, there is a perceived, I don't know how to say it, in Germany, for instance, since we are all from 3 German suppliers, or OEMs, manufacturing is deemed as a safe, cool place to be, and it's accepted as a good employer. That's not quite the same in the UK. And I think there is a need to address that topic, and hence you will open up more children to a different market that they wouldn't naturally go to. So I think the apprenticeship scheme, universities, early learning, STEM, all needs addressing more, because what we're getting isn't enough. And I think you would probably echo that in your field, I would hope.
Yeah, for a politician with a strategy. So I think personally we've got to discount the government. I think it's down to us. So the way we operate, we do engage with a whole range of educational facilities in our local markets. We go all the way down, all the way up to universities. Interestingly, we're trying to push that more to the northern universities as we try and level up a little bit. So we're trying to get away a little bit, not that the great Warwick, Aston, we work closely with those guys, but we're really trying to move north a little bit into Sheffield and into Wolverhampton, into Manchester, to try and level up a little bit more. So I think, again, it's incumbent on all of us to really engage locally. Apprenticeship levy doesn't work, period. May as well bin it now and replace it, in my opinion. So I think, until we get a government with a strategy, we're really going to have to work it out ourselves, how we go about attracting and keeping young talent.
And I want just a very brief from all of you, what your vision of the factory of the future is going to be. 20 seconds each. Come on, what's it going to look like? What's the dream job going to look like?
We are building the dream factory for our electric cars as a greenfield factory into our Cheshire brick brownfield. Yeah? And this is a factory where workplaces, they will go from more from muscles to minds, from hands to head. Yeah? So highly qualified, highly motivational, super sustainable, a very diverse workforce, and it's the place where you want to work. And I'm already today flicking over people on working on the old world to working on the new world. And that will take me now the next 3-4 years, and then everybody will work on Dream Factory concept because they love it. Yeah.
Digitalized, green, sustainable factory with at least 60% women and 20% D&I. So diverse, creative, mixed group to work together to build better future for all of us.
Alena.
We've got one in Hungary, in Szombathely. We opened it last year. It runs under the Factories of the Future concept, and it ticks all the boxes you've just mentioned: sustainable, modular, automated, building parts for the e-mobility division, so kind of en route, and it's our first one. So I'll open the invitations just as you did.
Well, thank you. Thank you. My vision would be, in simple terms, green, clean, inspirational, and productive.
And I think we've got a panel here who can lead us towards that future. Thank you very much indeed, all four of you. Thank you.